the opening lead out of turn. So if you remember, we were talking about the job of the director being to keep things moving, but to do it in a fair way. And the elephant in the room was always going to be information and how we dealt with that. So let's have a go at it and see how we can deal with an opening lead out of turn. So let's start with an example. We're going to have the fact that North is dealer. Simple bidding, the dealer opens 1 no trump, the opposition pass, straight into 3 no trumps, and that's the contract. But suddenly, instead of East starting the lead, West places the lead and places it face up, an ace of clubs on the table. So as director, you'd be called to the table and asked what happens next. Well, the problem here is that it should have come from the left of the declarer, but what do you do if it comes from the right? And is your decision going to vary according to what the card is that's led? You see, if you've got the 2 of clubs led against 3 no trumps, most people would decide that that's the 4th highest of only 4 cards in clubs, and it has at least 1 honor at the top of it. For many people, leading a 9 with a standard lead means that the 9 is either a singleton or a doubleton. And with my partners, if they lead the king of clubs against 3 no trumps, I'm expecting king, queen, jack of the suit, or maybe king, queen, 10. So that's giving a lot of information. And we know that information is going to be one of the problems that we have to deal with. Now we can have a look at our toolbox, and we've got our favorite time machine and memory eraser in there. We're not going to be able to use the time machine in dealing with this, but later on we'll have to see what we can do with the memory eraser. So going back to the problem, could we get an easy start on this one? Could we keep things moving by letting the lead stand? That's a possibility, isn't it? And who do you think should decide that? Well, it's not going to be you, the director, I'll tell you that. And if you remember, when it comes to fairness, is it going to be the elephant that makes a mistake, or the mouse that could bear the brunt of the mistake? It's obviously going to be the mouse, isn't it? So the person who decides whether or not to accept that opening lead from the wrong place is going to be the declarer. Got a funny question perhaps next is, which hand should be the dummy? Should it be the south and have the lead come right round through the declarer and then end up with the 4th card being played from south as a dummy? Or should you switch over and make the declarer the dummy and the dummy the declarer? Well, who's going to decide that? It's going to be the declarer again. They have a chance to decide. But we can't be messing about with moving cards around or people getting up and walking around the table. So if they do decide to have the declarer's hand becoming the dummy, North isn't going to be the person playing it. Their partner South is going to play this particular hand. So what we've had there is we've had 2 choices. If the declarer accepts the lead, they've got 2 choices that they can make. The first is that the dummy goes down straight away and the lead comes round to the dummy. Or alternatively, you, the person who was North in this case, can become the dummy and let your partner become declarer. So we've got 2 possibilities there. Now, what happens if they don't accept the lead? After all, they might have found that having the lead come from their right instead of from their left helps their hand and makes them avoid something which they didn't want to have happening later on. But if that's not the case, they might well say, no, I don't want to accept the lead. And then you're going to have to deal with our old problem, information. So we've decided, or at least the declarer has decided, to let the opposition put the lead card back in their hand. So what would be the fair way of dealing with that information? Well, as we've already said, it's already told their partner quite a lot about their hand, at least that suit. And it's either going to give the person who should have led the idea that clubs is a good lead, or that in fact it's a suit to be avoided. So what the declarer can do is take advantage of that information for themselves. They can either insist that the true person to make the lead, their left-hand opponent, actually leads the suit that was shown by the right-hand opponent. And if that 9 was led, showing that it was just a singleton or doubleton, they might well want to insist that a club be led. Whereas if it was showing the king, queen, and a jack or 10 there, they might decide they don't want it led, and that's their other choice, that they can then choose whether or not the suit is led. And the quid pro quo for that is that the person who led the wrong card can put it back in their hand. Ah, you're saying to yourselves, is that enough? Well, no, it's not. Because they could lead a different suit, lead the ace of hearts, say, and the moment they've won that, they could start leading their clubs, which they've been told not to lead. So we don't just say that you can't lead it for that one particular trick. They can't lead it for as long as that person retains the lead. In other words, they've got to lose the lead and get it back again before they can lead the suit that they've been told not to lead first time round. And what's more, they can't just do it willy-nilly later on. This is where the memory eraser comes in. When it comes back to them and they do regain the lead, they've got to have a proper reason, a proper bridge reason that anybody playing that hand would do for switching to the suit that they'd been told that they couldn't lead. And that's where the memory eraser comes in. It's the closest we can get that they can't just do it on the basis that they knew that their partner wanted to have the clubs led. They've got to have a reason that anybody playing the hand would be able to work out at that point. So we started off with 2 choices that the declarer had if they accepted the lead, and we've now got 2 choices if they don't accept the lead. They can either insist that the suit's led, or they can insist that another suit be led. And we've had ways of hindering a switch back to that wrongly led suit. But the quid pro quo for that is that the original card that was wrongly led just goes back into the person's hand, and there's no more worries about that. So far, we've got 4 choices that the director's got, and we're not finished. There's a 5th one to come as well. What you can do is actually defer your decision. You can put it off for a while as declarer. And what happens is the card stays face up on the table. Everybody sees it. And the right-hand opponent, in other words, the person who played that card by mistake, has to play it at the first legal opportunity that they've got. I say legal because, of course, they've got to carry on following suit. But if they're playing a club, in this case, they would have to play the club that they'd first played. And if they've got to discard, then they've got to discard that club card that they played at first time. Except, as I say, it's called deferring the decision, because if the left-hand opponent, in other words, the partner of this person who led the card wrongly, gets the lead later on, and that card is still exposed up on the table there, then the declarer can again switch back to deciding either that left-hand opponent plays the suit or does not play the suit that is in that card. And again, as before, if they exercise that right, then the card just goes back into the right-hand opponent's hand. So we can sum this all up, that we've got 5 choices. And if you think it's been complicated, don't worry, because you don't have to explain all this in the sort of way that I've explained it to the declarer. There's some standard wording that the EBU has given, And you can have this on a piece of paper or a card, pull it out of your pocket, and you just stand there and you speak to the declarer. And let's assume that there's been a spade lead from the wrong side. Then what you say to the declarer is this: you as declarer have 5 choices, and you must make your choice without consulting your partner. The first 2 involve accepting the opening lead, and they are: 1, dummy goes down now and the lead comes round to the dummy. 2, you can become the dummy and let your partner become declarer. And if you do not accept the opening lead out of turn, the lead reverts to your left-hand opponent. So you get number 3, which is you may let them play what they wish, and the offending card stays on the table as a major penalty card to be played at the first legal opportunity. And then the final 2 options involve the offending card being restored to your right-hand opponent's hand, and they are: 4, you may demand that the left-hand opponent lead a spade. 5, you may forbid a spade lead from left-hand opponent for so long as they retain the lead. In other words, they must lose the lead and then regain it before they may lead spades. And finally, you say, if declarer chooses to demand or forbid a spade lead, then when the left-hand opponent regains the lead, they must have a sound bridge reason for now switching to a spade. So what we've done is cover the 5 choices that are given to a declarer when there's an opening lead out of turn.